to Luke chapter 3 first. That'll be the first place we look. But I want to preach an interesting title today. The message I want to preach tonight is called How to Tell Someone No. It's real easy. You just put your mouth together and make that N sound, and then you go, no. No, that's not what we're talking about. Maybe not everyone has this problem. For me, sometimes I struggle to say no, to be honest. Sometimes it's hard for me to tell people no. I think a lot of people are that way, but then again, we live in a society where it gets easier and easier to say no. Somebody calls, you don't want that phone call. It gets real easy to be like, not interested, hang up on them. Or everywhere you go now, you're going to buy food, already overpriced. You're already thinking, man, I probably shouldn't be spending this money. And then what do they say? Would you like to donate to whatever charity? Sometimes you might have a struggle with that, but probably after you say no a few times, it gets real easy to be like, no, or no thank you, or whatever. The big thing now is tips. Everything you do, like if you use a card, it's like the machine wants you to put in a tip. And it's like, no, I don't want to give you a tip. But sometimes it gets easier to say no. And so I want to start out the message. Of course, the message is how to tell someone no, but I want to start out, I think it's very important that we look at this, because you could get real excited right now, like, all right, he's going to preach and tell me I don't have to do things for people and I don't have to ever say yes. And that's not what I'm saying at all. In fact, I want to start by saying sometimes we do need to say yes. As Christians, we should be willing to do things for people and to be helpful and be willing to give to people and those kinds of things. So there is certainly a time where we're supposed to say yes. Look at Luke chapter 3. Here's what John the Baptist said. Okay, as they're there getting baptized, they're asking John the Baptist questions. What should we do? And he's telling people, if they robbed anybody, they need to give back however many fold, and give people their just wages. And he's telling them all these things. And in verse 10, he says this: the people asked him, saying, what shall we do then? He answereth and said unto them, he that hath 2 coats, let him impart to him that hath none, and he that hath meat, let him do likewise. Okay, so if somebody came and they said, man, it sure is cold, could I have a coat? Do you have a coat I could wear? Then what we're supposed to do as Christians is realize, I do actually have an extra coat I can give you. Now look, that doesn't mean as a foolproof, 100% of the time, there's going to be certain reasons why you have to use wisdom and figure that out. But there is certainly a time where we should say, I'm going to help this person out, and I can do without. Look what Jesus says, Matthew chapter 5. And if you thought that one sounded like, hey, I'm supposed to help everybody out, well, look how Jesus says it. Matthew 5, look at verse 38. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that ye resist not evil, but whomsoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any will sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. And so it sounds like there are certainly times where as Christians we should be willing and happy to help people. And so if they come to us asking for something, it's not wrong. You don't have to feel like I'm a pushover if I tell people yes. It's a godly thing to do, to be willing to help people and to be willing to do something for people when it's in our power to do it. Okay, that's the key. Proverbs 3, you don't have to turn there, but Proverbs 3, 27, 28 says, withhold not good from them to whom it is due, when it is in the power of thine hand to do it. Say not unto thy neighbor, go and come again, and tomorrow I will give, when thou hast it by thee. So it's 2 things here. Number 1, to whom it is due. That's a big thing, because there are some people that you shouldn't be giving something to. There's and I'll get to that here in a minute. But then there are also those when you have opportunity to do it. There are sometimes you just don't have opportunity. You need to be willing to recognize that, and it's okay to say no. even though it's a godly thing, and it's good for us to be helpful and to be able to tell people yes when they ask for something or they need to borrow something or whatever. That's not wrong, but at the same time, we have only so much that we can do, so much we can give. And then it becomes like this socialistic mindset that everybody just gives what they have, and it's like this equality, but then you have some people who will never contribute, their fair share. And so you always got, the ones who are doing all the work finally get fed up with the fact that they're supporting everybody. You see what I mean? And so we'll look at that, but look at Galatians chapter 6. I want to read you another verse here. Galatians 6, starting verse 9. And let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap, if we faint not. As we have therefore opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially unto them who are of the household of faith. So you see there, he says, when you have opportunity. And Proverbs says, when it is in the power of thine hand to do it. These thoughts kind of go together. Okay, so what are some good reasons to say no? Okay, obviously, if someone asks you to do something and you know it's wrong, either it's a clear command in the Bible you shouldn't do it, or you just have a conviction that says, no, I don't do those things, I don't do that, and somebody's trying to pressure you into do it, you can't feel bad about saying no. Your conscience is clear before God. Whenever you say no, you're doing what he asked you to do. So if someone asks you to do something wrong, you know it's a sin, you know it's against your conscience, then obviously you're going to say no. How about this? Doing something for somebody or giving something to somebody that might not be best for them. All right? Somebody asks you for something and you know it's bad for them. I don't know how many times someone's asked me for a cigarette, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to get you. Well, just take me to the store so I can buy some. No, I'm not going to take you to the store to buy cigarettes or alcohol or whatever. I've been hit up by people a lot of times. You look like a nice guy. Hey, help me out. No, if I'm a nice guy, then I'm not going to give you something that's going to harm you. Okay, so you should be willing to say no. All right, if a drug addict comes to you asking for cash, say no, because you know what they're going to spend it on. That's just inevitable, or at very least, then you're giving them that temptation to do that. And so, obviously I've got some policies in place. We never give cash out. Somebody comes asking for gas, we might fill up their tank. Someone's starving, we might give them some food or whatever. But here, that brings me to my next point. Sometimes people, the Bible says if they don't work, they shouldn't eat. And so sometimes people are just lazy and they want you to do everything for them. And no, it's actually, it's good for you. You're going to need to do some work. And so you might tell somebody like that, no, obviously don't feel bad about that. You've got a reason for that. You've got a purpose for saying no. It's not like you just are mean and don't like people or something like that. All right, and then sometimes doing something for one person would cause you to neglect your responsibilities to somebody else. Okay, here's an example. If I was to give to people that asked for money or whatever to the point that my family didn't have enough food to eat, well, that'd be wrong. I'm supposed to supply for my family. If people are constantly getting me to do things for them to the point where I have no free time to give to my family, I might need to learn how to say no so that I can give my family some more things, some more opportunity. It's real hard for me to turn people down if they say, I want to come to church. Will you come pick me up? It's really hard for me to say no. And I'm like, well, I'll try to make it work out. And I do. But then I'm like super late to preach and everything's behind and all of. It's not wrong for me to say no. You'll have to find somebody else to do it or whatever. Okay, so those are the types of things I'm talking about. Whatever the case, there are times when we have to say no to some people. And so I began thinking about this through the Bible, looking at, famous cases, familiar stories where people have to say no. And I kind of broke down some different ways that we go about saying no. I mean, I'm literally how to tell someone no. Well, not literally, like I said, it's not right? But what I mean literally, like how to go about doing it. What's the way in which we should tell them no? Okay, number one is this. There's a time to tell people no emphatically. Okay, what I mean, like you're saying, hey, there's no way I'm going to do that. You're not even being nice about it anymore. You're maybe even a little bit upset that they would ask you or something like that. These are those times, like I said, somebody's trying to get you to do something you know is not right. Don't feel bad about telling them no. You know, that person that's trying to get a cigarette from you or something like that, and you're like, no, that's bad for you. I'm not going to give that to you. And then they'll try to put you on a guilt trip, try to make you feel bad. Well, you don't understand what it's like and blah, blah, blah. Don't feel bad about that. It's okay to be emphatic and to say no. I want to give you two examples of that. Look at 2 Samuel 13. Again, these are pretty familiar stories. I've talked about them before. You've read it in your Bibles before, I'm sure. 2 Samuel 13. And we'll look at the story of Joseph pretty soon, too. Both of these stories are a little bit similar, but kind of have different results. The first one is Tamar. Let's read 2 Samuel 13, starting in verse 6. So Amnon lay down and made himself sick. And when the king had come to see him, Amnon said unto the king, I pray thee, let Tamar my sister come and make me a couple of cakes in my sight, that I may eat at her hand. Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, Go now to thy brother Amnon's house and dress him meat. So Amnon was very much felt like he was in love with Tamar. And so he's trying to find a way to get her into his house and to take advantage of her. So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, and he was laid down, and she took flour and kneaded it and made cakes in his sight and did bake the cakes. And she took a pan and poured them out before him, but he refused to eat. And Amnon said, have out all the men from me. Okay, so now look, I don't know the layout of his house and how everything looked, but we know that there were people in his presence, and he told them to go out of the room, just to leave him alone. I don't know that they went out of the house or how that was exactly what his house looked like or how far away they were or whatever, but he tried to get rid of everybody. And then went out every man from him. And Amnon said unto Tamar, Bring the meat into the chamber, that I may eat of thine hand. And Tamar took the cakes which she had made and brought them into the chamber to Amnon her brother. And when she had brought them unto him to eat, he took hold of her and said unto her, Come lie with me, my sister. Now, what do you think her answer should be? Nay, right? No. Nay, my brother, she said, do not force me, for no such thing ought to be done in Israel. Do not thou this folly. And I, whither shall I cause my shame to go? And as for thee, thou shalt be as one of the fools in Israel. Now therefore, I pray thee, speak unto the king, for he will not withhold me from thee. Howbeit, and I think she knew that he would, but she's trying everything she can to get him to change his mind here. And howbeit, he would not hearken unto her voice, but being stronger than she, forced her and lay with her. And of course, this makes all kinds of complications. And then Absalom, her brother, is very upset. And anyway, all this bad things. But what happens is he ends up being able to lie with her. Now, she stood up and she said, Hey, brother, don't do so foolishly. And she did some of the things that I'm going to talk about, the other points in this message. But the main thing I want to show right there is that this should be a situation where she's very emphatic. No, get away from me. I'm not going to do such a thing. Okay. Now, I know we live in the Me Too generation. I put no blame on Tamar. I feel terrible about what happened here. I hate reading that story. But I do find it interesting that when you read in the Old Testament, when somebody has forced themselves upon a woman in the Old Testament law, that woman should have been screaming out and trying to get help. Otherwise, nobody really knows if she was part of it, and then she's trying to blame him later on or whatever. And again, you can have your own opinions on that, but that's what God said in the Old Testament. And so right here, it doesn't look like she screamed super loud and tried to get the attention of the guys that went outside of the room. But she did definitely say no, but she should have done anything at all cost. You know, and here she is trying to negotiate with them, like, hey, how about you ask my dad, and then maybe he'll say it's okay, or aren't you afraid you might look foolish or whatever. But you know what? There comes a time where you just need to get out of there, run, scream, do whatever, say no. The answer is no. Okay. Now, a similar example is Joseph in Genesis 39. You're familiar with this opposite situation here. There's a woman who's more of the predator going after Joseph. And again, he tries to reason with her. He tries to talk about, hey, you shouldn't do this, and I'm loyal to your husband and all that kind of stuff. But then later on, of course, we know the story. He ends up fleeing for sure. Genesis 39, look at verse 7. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph and said, lie with me. But he refused and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he has to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And it came to pass as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her, to lie by her or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by the garment, saying, lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. And it came to pass that she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house and spake unto them, saying, see, he hath brought in an Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. Okay, so here's the point I want to bring out about this. Maybe in this type of situation, you'd be tempted to think things out. Okay, if I refuse, if I tell her no, she's going to make my life miserable. She's going to turn me in. She's going to do that. Maybe he could have foresaw some of these things that happen. But you know what? At the end of the day, none of that matters. There comes a time where we say, my conscience being clear before God, I'm going to say no. I'm going to flee. I'm going to scream. I'm going to do whatever the case because I don't want this to happen. And there does come a time where we have to emphatically say no. And of course, in this situation of Tamar, she gets forced into this and is taken advantage of. In Joseph's case, he gets thrown into jail. Nobody seems to believe him, and he gets left there for a while. But God takes care of him, and it all works out for him in the very end. But certainly a terrible situation. Yet he emphatically said no. And you find a lot of cases in the Bible, like these kind of famous stories where people say no. It seems like emphatic. We'll talk about some more of those here in a minute. But second point I want to say is not only is one way to say no emphatically, another way to say no is skillfully. Okay, skillfully. And we see in all these examples that I'm going to give you a little bit of skill involved there. The way Tamar tried to, use wisdom to talk her brother, half-brother, out of it, and it doesn't work, but she tries. Joseph trying to reason with Potiphar's wife, and he tries to negotiate and try to talk about. I believe that it's good to learn how to tell people no, and try to have some skill and have some wisdom, and to be able to figure out how to tell somebody no in the right way. Okay, so in the case that it isn't an emergency situation where you're fleeing from it and you're getting out of there, it is good to be able to sit down and skillfully talk to the person and let them know why you're saying no. Okay, this will take experience and a lot of time to learn how to do it maybe. The goal here, I believe, would be to get that person that you're telling no to understand why you're saying no, so that they will actually say, hey, you know what? That's a good point. That's a good, I don't think I want the answer to be yes. Does that make sense? And so you're trying to explain to them, like, hey, you don't really want this. I don't think I'll be helping anybody out. Again, example about the tip. The other a while back, sometimes on our way to Kansas City, we got to grab something to eat, and we'll run by A&W. Everybody in Iola's favorite place to eat, right? and they started hitting up with the whole tipping thing. I don't know if anybody noticed that. I don't know if you're pro tip, against tip. I'm a good tipper. We go to a restaurant. I know that it's kind of understood. It used to be that they would only pay these people like $3 an hour or something like that, and so they had to have this tip, And now that a lot of times that's not the case. They get really good competitive wages, but then the tipping thing is still around. And so like I said, nowadays, because of the program, almost anything that you use your card on is going to say, hey, would you like to leave a tip? And you're just like, no, I don't want to leave a tip. I ordered food, you gave me food, I'm paying way too much for the food, I don't want to give you a tip. But this young lady that's working there, they come out to the car and they give you the stuff and they take your card and they give you an order and all that stuff. And she came out and she was like, now you don't have to, but the machine's going to ask if you would like to give a tip. Would you like to? And I said, no. And I felt terrible about it. And she's like, oh. And I felt like, oh man, she's going to think that I'm just mean and like I didn't think she did a good job and all this kind of stuff. But I didn't say a word. In fact, I'm kind of like, because Valerie and I are talking about this, like that's ridiculous. I'm like rolling the window up so nobody can hear us talking. You know, because it is ridiculous, right? All right, so I felt terrible. And a lot of times you're going to feel that way when you have to tell somebody no, you know, they're asking for something and you've got a good reason, but you just tell them no. There's this awkwardness. And then there's a person who wants to come to you next time, and you know, I feel like that now. If we go back to, she probably doesn't even remember the situation, but I feel like we go back, like I owe her an explanation. It's not your service, so you did a good job, but here's what I was thinking. Here's why I said no. I'm tempted to want to explain those things, and that's good to some degree. I'm not saying in this situation you need to do that, but it's good to explain to that person why it is that you're saying no. And you know, in the world, this becomes very important because as Christians, there's certain things that we are very strongly against something, or there's something that we are definitely going to do. Like maybe you got to tell your boss, no, I can't work on that. I can't work on that day I have a church activity. Right now, when I worked at UPS, I remember I was in management, and I remember a lot of the managers there were saying, you know, hey, we're not going to hire these Christians anymore because all these people at the time, it was people from Heartland. You know, I know what kind of things that they were doing, and I know why they're like, hey, I have to have this day off. I have to go do this. I have to go do that. But all the people that worked at UPS who were working all these times, and they weren't asking for the days off, all they're thinking, these guys are lazy. They don't want to do, you know, anything. And so they were telling me, like, hey, we got to stop hiring these people because they come in, they don't want to work and all that. And, of course, that was a terrible example that's being set. And I don't even think these people were being wicked or lazy or anything like that. Some of them were really good workers. It's just their priority in their mind was, hey, I need to be faithful in my church. The reason I'm going to school is so that I can be in the ministry full time, and so I want to engage myself in all these ministry things and all that. But nobody knew that. All we knew is, hey, people are calling in, or they're just saying, hey, I can't work on that day. And so if you're going to have to work something out with your boss, you know, let them know. Try to use skill so that they will say, you know what, I think I can let you do that. Right? And so here's what I used to do. Never really came up that much at UPS that I can remember, but here's what I try to do other times where I worked and had to ask for the day off. I would just tell them, look, it's so important for me to do this, but I don't want to, you know, mess you guys up either. So, you know, I'll come in, work for a little while, then I'll go to church, for example, and then I'll come back and I'll work some more. I'll even work overtime. I'll work on it on my day off, you know, I'll do whatever it is. And usually they would either work with you or they would appreciate that you're trying to do that. But see, doesn't that come across a lot better than just, hey, I got to have that day off. And then they're just like, oh, you're just lazy. And you're really not. You just have priorities that they don't understand. And maybe they'll never understand it, but you can try to use wisdom and skill. Let me give you an example. Look at Daniel chapter 1. And again, a lot of these examples, it looks like they try to use some wisdom when they say no. Now, Daniel and then the 3 Hebrew children as well, we'll talk about them. You know, these guys were known for being wise. They had great wisdom. This is why Nebuchadnezzar even wanted them there in the palace there. So let's start with verse 8. Daniel chapter 1, verse 8. But Daniel, all right, they're trying to fatten everybody up and give them all the best food, and they think it's going to make them smarter and healthier and all this. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now I assume there were things in that meal that were against the dietary laws of the Old Testament. And Daniel was like, I'm not going to eat pork. I'm not going to eat these things. And I'm not going to drink alcoholic wine. I assume that's the idea here. And so it says, now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And if you read back in somewhere in Kings, at the end of Kings, when they go into Babylonian captivity, they take all the young men and they make them become eunuchs. And so this, unfortunately, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, they were made to become eunuchs. A terrible situation. They were stolen from their house, taken into slavery, and all that stuff. And so now they're put into this place. All those eunuchs are put into this, this like little camp or whatever where they're hanging out and they're doing things for the king and they're getting trained up. And so the guy that's in charge of all that favors Daniel. And it's like, hey, you're a wise man. I can go to you and you can help me with some things. And he really leans on Daniel, it seems like. And he brought him into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink, for why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall he make me endanger my head to the king. Then said Daniel to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let me give us pulse to eat and water to drink, and then let our countenance be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat. And as thou seest, deal with thy servants. So he consented to them in this matter, and proved them 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, their countenances appear fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat of the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink, and gave them pulse. As for these four, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. So you see this. Now, obviously, God intervened here. I believe that God gave them special health and prosperity in this situation because they were being obedient to him. But whatever the case, they negotiated. They said, you know what, give me 10 days and let me prove it to you. Let me show that I'm doing this for the right reasons. I'm not just, abstaining from. Now, here's a guy, again, these are kids that got stolen from their home, made to be eunuchs. That's terrible in and of itself. Made to be slaves, doing whatever the king tells them to do. You would understand if they're a little bit short, with the king, and they're not so quick to participate in everything he wants to do. But this wasn't the case. He was very careful how to answer these people and say, look, God will protect us. God will help us. He'll bless us if you allow us to do what he wants us to do. And so they say no, but they say it skillfully. And they say it in a way where the leader there comes to the conclusion, hey, you guys are right. I'm glad that you said no. In fact, I'm going to change my view on all these guys. I'm going to make them eat differently and all that as well. So there are other cases as you continue to read on. Obviously, there's the case where Nebuchadnezzar builds a statue, and he has all the people bow down to the statue. And the three Hebrew children stand up. They say, hey, we're not going to bow down to this. And they're like, hey, we're not trying to be disrespectful to the king. You can see how they answer him, and they're very, very careful. Daniel does the same thing later on when interpreting dreams and all that stuff. We have to use skill as Christians in this world. And so, some people have this idea that if I tell people, if I just say yes all the time and I help people out and I do things for people, then I'm just this pushover. And they think it's like this really good characteristic just to be like, no, you owe me, I don't owe you. I mean, there's just this real, there's jerky attitude that people have where it's just like, I'm the one that you should be helping me. I should be benefiting off of you. Christians shouldn't have that attitude. Christians should be willing to humble themselves, help people out, give to people that ask them to. But then there comes a time where they say, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. All right? But you're not coming off as a jerk. You're not coming off as somebody who's just looking for themselves and trying to make themselves prosper and all this stuff. You come out with a good conscience because you are doing your best to say, hey, I'm doing what's right. If it's wicked, you didn't want any part of it anyway. You maybe emphatically said no. You maybe got out of there and made sure that these influences, maybe peer pressure or whatever it is, wasn't going to influence you, and you said no. But then also, you want to use skill, and you want to help people that maybe don't understand why your answer is no. You want to be able to explain to them in the best way you can, using wisdom and using skill. The Bible says, if any man lack wisdom, let him ask the Father. Okay, so if you're not sure how to handle those situations and how to tell somebody no, let me get back with you and spend some time. You might say to somebody, let me get back with you. Spend some time praying. Spend some time thinking about what the best way and the wisest way is to give them that answer. But that brings me to my last point, kind of goes along with this, and that is this, honesty. Okay, so how to tell someone no? There are times where you need to tell them emphatically, hey, you're not going to change my mind. I don't care what you do to me. The answer is no. There's going to also be some times where you use skill. The answer is no, but let me explain why. And give me a chance to prove to you that this is the best solution or whatever. This is skillfully. So emphatically, skillfully. But the third one is very important, honestly. Honestly. Now, notice that using wisdom doesn't mean deceiving people. And I'll just be honest with you. Sometimes my first tendency when I have to tell somebody no and I know they're not going to understand it or they're not going to like it is to just try to avoid the situation or maybe not really give them an answer but try to find an excuse. You know what I mean? Like somebody's coming and maybe I know they're going to ask me for something and I know the answer is going to be no. I'll just try to find a way to get around from them ever asking or something like that. Is anybody with me, or am I the only one that can be deceitful sometimes? Okay, so here's the thing: we should always be honest. Okay, and what you're going to find out in the end, honesty is going to be the best way to go anyway. And this goes real closely with the skillfully thing. Okay, and partly I think why people don't want that confrontation of telling somebody no is because they don't have a lot of experience doing it and doing it in a skillful way. All right, so the way you get any skill, you develop any skill, is by experience, okay? And you have to learn how to go ahead and say, hey, this is an opportunity for me to tell this person no. And sometimes what you'll find is telling somebody no and explaining to them why the answer is no and being straightforward with them, not trying to hide it or get around it or try to avoid it, being straightforward with them is going to help them in the long run, all right? And again, if you're just thinking, hey, this is going to make this person mad, they're never going to want to talk to me again, I'm never going to be able to drive through the A&W again without looking at, no. Use wisdom. If you need help, ask God for wisdom and use that and be honest with that person and explain to them. It'll go a long way for you to be able to do that. The right thing to do is to come out and be honest about why you're saying no. And if you can't do that, you don't feel like you're able to do that, then pray about it, give it some time, and ask the Lord help, or ask advice from other people. Now, you don't always have the opportunity to get back with somebody. Sometimes it's immediate. But just do the best you can. Stand up for right. Don't allow someone to bully you into doing a sin. Be emphatic about that. Use skill. Be honest. And these are the main things. If you can say yes to somebody, say yes. Okay, you don't have to be always looking for a way to tell people no because you just don't want to do something. Have the heart, have the Christian heart that says, I want to give to people, I want to be a help to people. As much as I have opportunity to do it, as much as it's in my power to do so, I want to help people. And then that'll probably eliminate a lot of the problem because you don't have to tell people no all the time. You'll go ahead and do stuff for people. But like we talked about, there are times where you don't have that luxury and you can't tell them that. So learn to have some wisdom and be skillful at how you tell them that. And finally, always be honest with people, even if you have to tell them no. Okay, let's pray. Father, thank you for your word and the wisdom that we can get from reading your word, the wisdom that you give us liberally, the Bible says, to those who ask for it, Lord. And I pray that you will help us to remember that, come to you, not to try to handle situations in our own might and our own strength. I pray that you'll help us, Lord, find these situations where we have to say no to somebody. Help us stand up against evil and things that are wicked. Help us stand against that and be emphatic when it comes to answering no. But then those who might not understand, and maybe it's not, maybe we have a little more liberty to talk to them about it, help us to be wise and give us the skill that's needed, Lord, to explain to people why the answer is no and why it's good for them. And then finally, Lord, help us to be honest. Help us not try to avoid that confrontation and to avoid having to tell people no, but help us just to dig deep, find the boldness that we need, and find the wisdom that we need through you and be able to say no. And help us to prosper in these ways, Lord, according to your wisdom and your word. And I pray you be glorified with what we do.